everybody. Clay Blair with Boulevard Recording. I've seen all your comments, and it seems like a lot of you guys have some really great ideas on videos, and I've actually written a bunch of them down. And this is an idea that I've had that I wanted to execute a while back, but I usually do these with my friend Scott, and since the pandemic, it's been pretty tough in LA to get a couple guys together to do this socially distanced because there's a lot going on. So I'm doing this video myself. We did a video about recording drums in '63, and what I want to do is touch on how they recorded guitars, acoustic and electric, from '62 basically up until Revolver. Not much changed. The only thing that did change around Revolver was that Jeff Emmerich started to use different mics. But for the most part, it's a U47 or a U48 on John or George's amp. In the early days, occasionally a KM54 was put on John's amp to differentiate between the two amps. The thought was having just a mono master is using a different mic because they both used Vox AC30s. And in the early days, Lennon actually had an AC15 twin, and they had fawn colored amps. This is a 63 or a 64 with a top boost. And the three guitars in front of me, as far as I can tell, between that period of 62 and 63 and some of 64, these were the most recorded guitars by the Beatles. The Gibson J160E, almost the entire first record is a J160E, both George and John for a lot of it. There's only a couple of songs where Lennon puts on his 325, which is this little guy here. And there's only a couple songs on the first record where George is playing his duo jet, which is not seen here. Don't have a duo jet. But the Gent, the Country Gent by Gretsch, was used a lot in the early days, all the way up until later '64. And that was what George played when he wasn't playing the J160E. Okay, so what is this little guy? If you've seen any of the stuff I did with Warren Hewart, we did a master class on Abbey Road, and we used a microphone very similar to this called a KM56. And this is a KM54. Now this mic was used the least on guitar, but in the early days when they were doing a lot of mono stuff, 2-track, they would stick this on John's amp, and it would have it actually has the same capsule as a KM56. The KM56 is switchable, so you can switch the pattern. This is set as cardioid. Now, unfortunately, those capsules on KM54s are super rare. They go bad. This is a replaced capsule on mine, so this is actually called a KM54AC. So it is a little bit different than the original, but the idea is the same. It's a tube condenser, a small diaphragm, and they're beautiful mics. And so I'm going to just show you a very bizarre way that Norman Smith was miking their AC30s and John's AC15 twin in the early days. I've seen pictures of this mic being a couple inches off the amp, but in the middle, which means right here is a block. This is part of the the speaker baffle, and this is a speaker, this is a speaker. These amps came with Blue Alnico speakers. That's what's in this amp. And these amps were top boost. It's unknown. There's evidence that the Beatles had both top boost and non-top boost models at Abbey Road in this period. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that this microphone is familiar. This is a Telefunken U48. Abbey Road had mostly Neumann, I believe, U48s, U47s. Some of the U47s were U47/8s, which they converted to have a figure 8 pattern because they were used so much. I'd say on the guitar amps, you're probably going to see more U47s because they're not going to be using the figure 8 pattern much. It's going to be more of a cardioid pattern on guitar amps. This microphone is the majority of the sound of the Beatle guitar. That means acoustic guitar, electric guitar from 62 when they did their first couple singles, and to 63 all the way up until Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's. But I want to show you the U48 again, and like I showed you earlier, they also early on were putting these mics in between the baffle of the two speakers on the AC30s. It's funny, I've been doing it the past couple days just to kind of get backing tracks, and I'm about to show you guys how it sounds. It actually sounds pretty good because the AC30s are really bright amps, so maybe that's part of the reason. And then eventually they, maybe they didn't want to piss them off and mess with their amps because the way they were set were the way the Beatles were used to hearing them when they were touring and playing. And maybe they said, well, these amps are so bright and they don't want to change their amps, and we don't want to ask them because we don't really know these guys that well, because this was early on. This is, imagine with the Beatles or Meet the Beatles in America, to me, it was like the first time they really did an album and took their time somewhat. Please Please Me was done in a day, so they didn't really get a whole lot of George Martin time. And you'll see, of course, on with the Beatles a bit more production on George Martin's part. So if you put a very big microphone like a U47 or U48 or a KM56, which is also a very bright microphone, right on the speaker, and even off the speaker, it's really bright. It's really, really bright. So that's my theory early on as to why maybe they started to put these between there. hope you all enjoyed that video and learned something maybe you didn't know. And that really weird way of miking an amp where you put the mic between the speakers, none of us are probably ever going to do that. So while it may seem useless in the sense of applying it to your own recording setup, it's still interesting to think about that for whatever reason the engineers at EMI thought that those amps sounded so bad that they stuck the microphones between the speakers. But it is what it is. And we're going to get into the later stuff on the next video. Actually, we're going to jump all the way to Let It Be. Kind of want to do some video work in front of the movie that's coming out. I want to be careful not to do too much because I think that there's a lot that we're going to see in this movie that we've never seen before that might perhaps change some of the opinions or what has been written about how the Beatles recorded that album with Glenn Johns. But I have a basic idea, and I don't think it's going to show us too much of anything crazy, but we're going to get into that next, and that's going to be really fun. And Brendan's coming back. He actually has his rooftop Ludwig Hollywood kit, and we're going to get into how Glenn Johns recorded the drums on Let It Be.